So math was not at all neutral like I thought. Instead, it was declaring God's praises, that God is still on his throne, that he's still faithfully holding all things together, and that you can trust him. And that's the message students should be getting as they study math. There are different ways to represent quantities. In math, a lot of math is just like a language system, and the language side can vary, right? The quantities and consistencies don't. They're what God created and he sustains, and our language system is just a way of describing that. And again, it's walking it through step by step so that they can see what. Hello, my name's Catherine Hannon. Used to be Catherine Loop, but I got married a year and a half ago, and now it's Catherine Loop Hannon. And I'm the author of the Principles of Mathematics curriculum, the junior high math program. Here's one right here. And so today I wanted to talk with you a little bit about the program as well as the e-courses that are now available on the Academy to go with the program. But to start with, if you would just comment and list your name and where you're tuning in from so we know you're here, and let me know if you can hear me, and then we'll get started from there. And if you have questions about the Principles of Mathematics program or the e-courses that go with it, please feel free to leave those in the comments field and I will do my best to address them. So I wanted to start by sharing just a little bit about how I got started writing the program. I was homeschooled, and I was blessed to be homeschooled in a Christian homeschooling family. And so we looked for God in different subjects, and we saw science as exploring God's creation. But when it came to math, we had this block that math was just neutral. That was just numbers on a piece of paper that you solved and you learned how to work with. But there was no real way to teach it from a biblical perspective, except for maybe adding a Bible verse up at the top of the page or talking about how God divided the Red Sea, right? And then as a senior, my mom had me read a book called Mathematics Is God Silent by James Nichol. And he went through the history of math and really showed how not only was math not neutral, but apart from a biblical, faithful creator God, we can't explain why it is that math actually works consistently outside of a textbook. So math was not at all neutral like I thought. Instead, it was declaring God's praises. And yet I had missed that all those years growing up. And so the Lord led me through a process to start writing and speaking on math to try to help other students not miss his handiwork in math. And it makes such a difference when you see it from that perspective, because otherwise, a lot of students wonder why in the world are they studying math, right? Especially when you start moving into high school and algebra and letters come up in the math course, right? And you're going, well, why in the world are we doing this? Well, we're doing it because math and all those letters are ways of describing the quantities and consistencies that God created and that he sustains. And they're shouting out at us that he's faithful. There's a verse in Jeremiah. It says, Jeremiah 33:25 through 26 says, "Thus saith the Lord, if my covenant be not with day and night, and if I have not appointed the ordinances of heaven and earth," and another translation translates ordinances, fixed laws. It says consistencies, such as addition and subtraction and multiplication and division, "then will I cast away the seed of Jacob and David my servant." In other words, he's saying, look, you can see that I'm a covenant-keeping God from the very consistencies of creation, which is what we're describing in math. 1 plus 1 actually equals 2 outside of a textbook, right? Because that's a consistency that God created and that he sustains, and it's reminding us that he keeps his word, that he keeps his covenant. And here he was specifically focusing on his covenant with Jacob and David, but we can rely on God to keep his covenant of redemption through Jesus as well. And so math, every time you solve a math problem and you see that it still works, it's shouting out at you that God is still on his throne, that he's still faithfully holding all things together, and that you can trust him. And that's the message students should be getting as they study math. And yet it's not the message that's typically coming across in math. Typically, students leave math thinking about what? Math. right? Facts and figures. They're not leaving their math class going, oh wow, I need to pay attention to God and to what his word says because he will do all that he's promised, right? But they should be, and they can be. And so one of the things that I did in the Principles of Mathematics program was really help students see how every concept they're learning really truly is a way of describing those real life quantities and consistencies that God created and that he sustains. Because I didn't want to just tell them that and then have them go learn it, but I wanted them to actually see it. It's kind of like when you're teaching cooking, you wouldn't just tell your child, this is how you cook. You would actually show them, right? Because if you just taught cooking from a textbook for 8 years, your children might think they hated to cook, but they haven't really cooked. And it's that same way in math. So many students think they hate math, but they've never really been given the opportunity to see it in action and to understand why they're learning what they're learning and to really see the Creator's handiwork on display. And so I chose to write the Principles of Mathematics program for the junior high age range. So somewhere between grade 6 and 8 is where most students are ready for this, because it gives them an opportunity to firm up all of the foundational concepts while they're building their biblical worldview and problem-solving skills, and then kind of get sneak peeks into what's coming in high school so that they're prepared to see algebra and geometry and trigonometry from a biblical worldview too. So with that, I wanted to kind of go through and show you a little bit of the program and how it works, and also how the ECourse component works. And if you're just joining us, please feel free to leave a comment. Let me know where you're coming from. Thanks for joining in, Lindsay, from Florida. It's great to have you. And you still have little learners, which is awesome. I wanted to mention that this will work well as a transition over from the Math Lessons for a Living Education program, because in that program, students are learning to see math as a way of describing real life as well, and then it's designed so that it can transition over into this. And there is more reading in the Principles of Mathematics program, so if you're transitioning over and your student doesn't like to read, the ECourse is a great option to remove the heaviness on the reading side. There's a lot of reading because I wanted to really show the concepts in action, and so you have to describe that a little bit more. But the ECourse removes that because they get to watch it in an animated slide presentation as opposed to having to read it. So if you don't have a reader, it still works. So with that, let me go ahead and show you a little bit of the first book. So this is Principles of Mathematics 1. And hello, Andrea. I'm glad you just started it, so I hope you enjoy the program. So here, basically, the students read a lesson each day, and then there is a teacher guide that goes with it where there's worksheets that they would then complete. And there's a schedule at the glance to make it all really simple. It tells you each day, do this lesson, do this worksheet. If you have the ECourse, rather than reading the lesson, they will watch that lesson on the ECourse. And that will feature, and I'll show you that in just a minute, it will feature me walking them through those concepts for the day. And then they can use their textbook as a reference. If they needed to read a little bit more about something that was said, they can do that, but they don't have to read every lesson. There'll be a couple spots where I tell them, make sure you read this, but for the most part, I'm teaching them the concepts, and then they can just use that textbook as a reference if they come up with questions as they're trying to complete their problems. So they do a lesson and they do a worksheet. Now there is an accelerated schedule for those who are older and trying to do both books in 1 year. We found that a lot of students, when they get to high school math, especially algebra, they get lost if they didn't really understand the lower levels and why they were learning what they were learning. Math is very cumulative. And so this course is a great one to go back and fill in all the gaps, because I wrote it knowing that people would be coming into it from a lot of different courses, and so it teaches the concepts in order and it tries to fill in all of those gaps for the students. And so many high schoolers have used it as a review to really firm up that foundation. There's plenty of new material in how math applies and what it's really all about that an older student isn't going to find or have it feel remedial at all. So you can do it accelerated in 1 year. There's also a schedule to do it in 3 years. And I said it was grades 6 through 8, ideally if you were using it as your full math curriculum for that year. So you could start in 6th grade and do 6th, 7th, and 8th, and there's also a schedule available for that as well. But all the schedules are laid out where you can just look at what you need to do for the day, and you can put a check mark when you've got it done in a grade if you choose to do that. All right, so let me go ahead and show you just a little bit. So book 1 focuses on arithmetic and the core ideas of shape and like the foundation that you will build on in geometry. So while they're reviewing the basics, they're building their worldview. So at the very beginning, as they're reviewing place value, which they already should be familiar with by this point, but I wanted them to see it, fill in the gaps, and also see it from the biblical worldview. So as they do place value, they look at how different cultures have represented numbers, because there are different ways to represent quantities. In math, a lot of math is just like a language system, and the language side can vary, right? The quantities and consistencies don't. They're what God created and He sustains, and our language system is just a way of describing that. But just like the Tower of Babel had lots of different languages that we can speak, there's lots of different mathematical languages too, and understanding that can help students begin to think through what they're learning in math, not just as like something to learn rotely, but as men using their God-given abilities to find ways to solve problems, to find ways to describe His creation. Kind of like Adam did back in the Garden of Eden. He looked at the animals and he assigned names to them, right? In math, we look at the quantities and consistencies around us and we assign names to them and symbols to describe them, and then find ways to work with them. And we can do that because God gave us that ability. He created us capable of subduing the earth. So there's a lot of making sure that they understand those foundational concepts, as well as building their thinking skills to be able to really think through, okay, how do I actually apply what I'm learning and begin to see math as more than just that textbook exercise. So they're learning about time zones as they review addition and subtraction. They get to make an abacus. And then as you go forward, and they have reviewed those foundationals, it moves into fractions, and really trying to help them understand what are we doing with fractions and how fractions represent division. It's an area where a lot of students get tripped up in fractions because it's a little bit more abstract of a concept. And so students should already be fairly familiar with fractions before they start this, but this will go through and help firm that up. And if they're not, they may need to slow down and just do a little bit of extra in that area. Goes through decimals. Okay, so here we're looking at ratios. On their worksheet, they get to explore the ratio of sunflower seeds in a sunflower. Do you know that within a sunflower, the seeds are arranged in spirals? And some spiral this way and some spiral that way. And the ratio between those two spirals is always approximately the same. And it's that ratio that enables the most number of sunflower seeds to fit in any given sunflower. So we see that God created sunflowers to reproduce in the most efficient way possible. And they actually get to explore that themselves on the worksheet. So like I said, there's a lot of application and getting to see why they're learning what they're learning as they go through it. They look at sets, they look at statistics, how to discern through the stuff that they see in the news so that they understand what's really going on. And then they look at geometry, which is a way of measuring the earth. And so they learn how to use it in real life. They find how to find I think they do the height of the tree in this one, the distance across the stream. But they're applying what they're studying as they go through. And again, the worksheets, rather than having a ton of problems that students are left wondering, well, why in the world am I doing it? The worksheets are not an overwhelming number of problems, because I felt like if they understood what they were doing, they didn't need as many problems with it. So you'll see as you look through it that there's a lot of application, a lot of helping them build their problem-solving skills, a lot of review built into it. I worked really hard to include like skill sharpenings and to build the structure of the course so that concepts included reviews of previous concepts so that students wouldn't forget what they were really learning as they went through it. So that's book 1. And then book 2 is more of pre-algebra. So it's going through and introducing why do we need letters and what in the world are we doing with the letters. So as they learn about unknowns, they're exploring altitude. As they learn about graphing, they're getting to see examples of what the graphs could be representing. So again, we're trying to show them math in action. And on their worksheets, when they're solving problems, let me find one to show you here. So like there's a lot of example meanings built in there so that they understand what that could really be about, okay? And they're not just left going, why am I dealing with X's and Y's and A's and B's? And the structure of book 2 is the same as the structure of book 1. And so I want to go ahead and show you the ECourse part, because as I said, that will be really helpful, especially if you have a student who is needing a little bit more hand-holding or doesn't like to read as much. The ECourse is just a great way to, they sit down, most of the videos are somewhere around 6 minutes long. They watch the video, they've learned the new concept, they can go work their worksheet and just use that textbook as more of a reference and spot reading here and there as they need to. So I'm going to see if I can't get my camera to look at my computer screen and see. Can you see? I mean, just a second, let me see if this is working. Is that on there right? Okay. I'm trying to get my camera so that you can see my screen. I couldn't quite figure out the screen sharing here. Okay. Hopefully you guys are seeing what I'm seeing. This is the Principles of Mathematics course. There's a little preview here you can go and watch. We're at the masterbooksacademy.com, and I'm going to show you kind of how the course works. So when you're in the course, you have a lesson, a video for each of the lessons, right? And so you can just navigate to the chapter you're on and the lesson you're on, and it'll keep track of your progress up here as well, so you kind of know how far are you into the course. So let me go ahead and show you one. So here is multi-digit division, remainders, and operations. Okay, and I'm just going to show a few sections here so you can kind of see how we're working through the problem. And so it has me describing what's going on step by step so the student can see it worked out for them. Is that better? I have my husband in the other room telling me if you guys can see what I'm seeing here. Can you see it? Okay, hopefully you guys can see it now. And is walking them through these new concepts and showing them things visually as well as with the words. And then I come on at the beginning and the end where they get to see my face and kind of remind them of the big picture in what we're looking at. Let's look at another one here. So this is with fractions. So again, they start with like me talking, and then we walk through the concepts with examples. Again, there's a lot of application thrown in there, so as they look at fractions, they're also looking at music and working them through that way. Let's see. Show this one. So this is the one, it is finding the height of a tree. This is one where we walk through how to find the height of a tree. And again, it's walking it through step by step so that they can see what's really going on. All right. So it's very simple interface. There is a discussion section where they can ask questions. I also put my email address there so that they can get in touch with me if they have questions as they're going through the course. I want people to, to feel like they can get the help that they need. We will take a look at, this is the Principles of Mathematics 2, Book 2, the e-course for that. And it's set up that same way. They're learning about compound interest, and Again, going to walk them through their definitions and help them go through several examples so that they understand the concept, and highlights important things that they need to remember. And again, I come on at the beginning and the end where they can see me. Let me show this one here with graphing. Graphing was one of those things that I got lost on in algebra, wondering why we had to do it. And so one of the things I worked really hard on with this course is to make sure that I also not only taught them the mechanics, but also gave them ideas of what the graphing could all be about and what we were really trying to do, how we were trying to picture that real life relationship. So that's the structure of the e-course, and I'm going to go ahead and put my thing back up here and take a look and see if any questions have come in. Let's see. Okay. Sorry, I have this camera that wants to fall off. There we go. Let's see. All right, no questions. If you have a question, please leave it in a comment. If you want me to show you something specifically, I have the books here and I can pick my camera up and move it around again if there's something that you want to take a look at. I wanted to go ahead and read to you a few quotes from some feedback that I've received on the e-course. So this is a note from Christy. She said, "Thank you so much for your expertise in teaching this course. My girls have done wonderfully in math this year, and they just asked if I can be sure to get the videos for next year also. I also want to thank you for your emphasis on the spiritual component of math. This has meant so much to us in that we try to keep the Lord in every aspect of our family life and education. My 12-year-old is Catherine also, and she really was touched with how you ended the course with the most important takeaway. It's absolutely absolute. Math is Kate's favorite subject, and she understands it very easily. However, my older daughter, who took this course, is 13, and math does not make sense to her, so it is a tough subject. She has said this year math is actually not that bad. She has done very well on the review lessons to study for her last test and earned a 95.7 on her last math test. She was so excited. The real-life examples are what made a difference for her to show her that math is useful and therefore good to learn." And I wanted to share that because I hear from a lot of students that understanding the purpose of math makes such a difference for them, which makes a whole lot of sense because when you see why you're learning what you're learning, it makes it a lot more meaningful to actually learn it, right? And I saw a question come through about, can more than one student use the e-course? So you have access for 12 months for one email address. So long as they're using that same login, they can, within a family, they can use that course at the same time. If you needed them to use it at different times, you would need to resubscribe after that 12 months. Here's a quote from Monica. She said, "We are loving the e-course. It's really made a huge difference in our understanding of the math lessons. We look forward to seeing you every day when we do school. May the Lord bless you for your hard work and diligence. Please know that we thank Him for using your love of math in the way you have shared His creation to help us learn and understand math like never before. Can't wait to dive into book 2. And Carmen said, "I wanted to thank you for creating the videos to go along with each lesson. My daughter has learned so much these past 2 levels. We used Principles of Mathematics 1 and 2 for 6th through 8th grades. It started with a wonderful review of arithmetic and continued into pre-algebra, geometry, statistics, and finances, and more. The videos were easy for her to watch on her own, and she was able to complete the worksheets with some minor help from me. I feel that she has made huge leaps in her math understanding. Things she used to struggle with, she now gets easily and says they are easy. We have enjoyed it so much that I recommend it to anyone who asks for middle school math suggestions." The author was quick to respond when we asked questions or recommendations from her. So wonderful to have that support. So those were just encouraging notes to me, because that was why I did the e-course and why I wrote the program, was to try to help students be able to really get math, especially those that didn't naturally get it, that were left wondering why they were learning what they were learning and seeing it as a meaningless structure, because it's not meaningless at all. And in fact, when we're not seeing God's handiwork in math, we end up subtly buying into naturalistic and humanistic thinking. You know, when I went back and I looked at, okay, what was I learning all those years when I wasn't seeing math as part of God's creation, I realized I had subtly been buying into naturalistic and humanistic thinking because when you think about it, math is the tool that scientists use, right? You can't get a degree in any field of science without a lot of math. And it's because it is the tool that scientists use to explore God's creation. So if you say math is just neutral, you're really subtly saying the sciences are just neutral, because math is really just that way of describing real life consistencies. And saying it's neutral is just a naturalistic idea, that it just is what it is, right? Or a humanistic idea that man and mathematicians must be pretty smart because they came up with all this stuff. No, we just found ways using our God-given abilities to describe what God had set in place. So it's very important to be giving God that glory and to really show students that. Not just tell them, but actually show them. Just like you show them how to cook by taking them into the kitchen. Actually show them how the different concepts they're learning really do describe God's creation. So I saw a question come in about the abacus. Is the abacus will still be available? So the abacus, there are instructions of how to make one out of an old picture frame, using just an old picture frame and some like craft beads. And those instructions are found in Book 1, Principles of Mathematics, Book 1. So you can have your child actually make one. Inside of the ECourse, it's done on screen. You know, it shows them how the abacus works on screen. So I hope that answers the question. Are there any other questions that I can answer? Just going to look through the comment feed here. Let's see. All right, well, it doesn't look like there are any other questions. I want to just encourage all of you listening that I know math can be a tough subject or an intimidating subject, especially if you were taught it just more in a rote fashion. But when you really see it as part of God's creation, it makes it so much easier. And you know, so I would just encourage you that God understands it. He can help you work it through with your child, and that as they get that glimpse of who He is that's revealed in math, and get to see why they're learning what they're learning, it makes it come alive, and it makes a whole lot more sense. And it's my prayer that now that these videos are available on the Academy, they were on my own website for a couple years now, which is how I've gotten that feedback, but now they're available more widespread on the Academy website. And so it's my prayer that it will help more and more students be able to see that biblical worldview in math. And I thank you guys so much for tuning in.